Minimum, I'd like to have you sign your name. If we're not getting hold of you by your cell phone, if you could provide that for us. And then if you'd like to receive the weekly newsletter, we need your email address in order to do that. So if you can fill that out, we'd appreciate it. Some introductions here this morning. John Barley in the corner is grain originator here out of the Brewster office. My name is Jim Van Hartog. I also work here at the Brewster office in grain origination. We have Michael Rupp sitting here. He works more with the cattle side on the feed division for Nuvision. And then we have Dan Utek. And I don't want to say works here. Because he always criticizes me every time I say something like that.
I just correct you.
So,
You can't call it work when you're having fun.
yeah. With that, we'll get started.
And as long as they keep sending me that little blue check every 2 weeks, I'll keep coming. So. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
If you noticed here, before we turn the lights off, I am wearing purple today. I'm in mourning. Not because it's morning, but just mourning because of our showing on Saturday. I really thought they had a chance. First we let them march right down, then we come back and score at 7-7. I said, hey, this might be all right, and then reality set in. See, I've been through the 70s. I've been through the 4 Super Bowl losses, and sometimes they call me here at the office a fair weather fan. I said, no, I'm a realist. Right? But I thought this year was going to be different because the Gophers got us on the right foot. That's why we won last week, because everybody had a positive attitude, and then we didn't have anything to build off of this year. So anyway, we have to resort to the sports motto for the state of Minnesota. Does anybody know what that is?
Always next year.
There's always next year. So, and we've got 2 new pitchers for the Twins now, even though they're 46 and 50 years old. I mean, that's a step in the right direction. You guys think that's funny?
ARB kind of picks up some of their contract.
Well, it could be. Okay, we'll get on with what you're here for. We have kind of a different meeting schedule, and that's why I want to spend just a minute talking about that. And it's my fault, so I'll accept full responsibility. Normally, we run these meetings Monday through Thursday. Unfortunately, this week, I have an appointment with my wife at a surgeon in Sioux Falls on Wednesday, so I'm out on Wednesday. Thursday and Friday of this week is AGP's annual meeting in Omaha. We do a lot of business with AGP, and the Nuvision has a lot of stock there, so we kind of need to know what's going on. So then we're coming back next Monday and Tuesday to finish up the round of meetings. So that's why I split up a little bit, and we'll make do with that. A lot of information, as Jim said, to cover, and we're going to try and go through that as best as we can. And for some reason here, my clicker doesn't want to work today. I hope it changes its mind. Maybe one of those. Yeah, it's not connected for some reason. We're going to talk about the final crop production report that came out last Friday. This is going to be fun if I have to do this all day. Nah, it's not the battery. There's, I think the peg for my wireless mouse for some reason isn't working. There we go. Maybe now we got it. Supply and demand updates that also came out on the 10th. Well, I guess we'll go back to the old way then. We'll talk a little bit about where we're at with the China trade war. Now, supposedly today, the Chinese delegation is in Washington, and they brought quite an entourage with them, and they'll be meeting at the White House sometime today or tomorrow, or by Wednesday, I think, to hopefully sign the Phase 1 agreement. It's an 86-page document. That's much I can tell you. Positive news over the weekend in that the lead trade person from the U.S. said there was very little lost or changed in the translation. That's why this took so long. This was agreed on several weeks ago, but everything then had to be fine-tuned and checked by the lawyers on both sides, and everything's pretty much as we expected as we went into this. So we'll see what happens. Now, I'll tell you right now that as we get into this trade agreement, I think the market might have to go through a little bit of a period of disappointment because the agreement's going to get signed. But what the agreement says, and they've been telling us this ever since they said it was coming, is that there's a 30-day cooling off period after it's signed. So if it's signed today, or if it's signed by the 15th, what does that mean? When can we expect to see purchases? February 15th, at the earliest. Now, there's going to be a lot of rumors floating around, but that's the way the agreement reads. The other thing that I think the market may be disappointed about with this is we're all expecting that as soon as it's signed, they're going to tell us every detail, right? No, because the part of the agreement, based on what China wants, is they do not want individual items listed as far as what and how much is going to be purchased, because it could be market what? Disruptive. And they don't want to upset the things, and we don't want to upset the market. So there's not going to be a lot of fine details on we're going to buy this and this and this and this and the dates we're going to buy it. Don't expect that out of this phase one agreement, because it's going to happen, but it's a two-year deal, and it's going to take time, hopefully, to work everything through. We're going to take a real quick look at South American production as far as where they're at down there, because we are in a global marketplace and it affects our markets. We're going to look at just a little bit of winter and spring forecasts. What now are they saying for the balance of January, for February? I think we have a map that goes out on the precip and temps for March, and just a few thoughts on what might be coming here for the 2020 growing season. We'll take a look at corn and soybean price charts and basis outlooks. Don't forget there's two parts to that marketing equation. And we'll talk a little bit about marketing outlook and opportunities that we think you need to be aware of. Questions are welcome at any time. This is your meeting. I just get to be the lucky one to present it. And by the way, I didn't have a weekend because of you guys. Okay?
Because you got a purple shirt.
I got a purple shirt, yeah. And my weekend went like this. Our Lions Club has a junior high basketball tournament in January. That happened to be on Saturday. And all day on Friday, I'm getting calls and emails from my fellow Lions saying, well, we can't come. So, you know, we got everything together. The last game of the tournament started at 3 o'clock. We cleaned up early, and I got to see the second quarter, and then I was disappointed. So we'll go from there. Here's the report. But the rest of my weekend was spent going through this information and trying to fine tune it and get it together. There's so much stuff to cover. I apologize if it gets a little bit long, but you guys need to be brought up to date, because there are so many numbers and so much information released last Friday that we're going to try and skim through it as best as we can. Now, here's the report. You say, well, holy cow, that's a lot of numbers. Yes. We're going to step through this real quickly as far as the big picture of the report. Then we'll go into more details. So let's just kind of start from the top and work down. I want you to try and follow me with the progression of three areas here. First of all, this second column in from your right-hand side, those are the numbers that the USDA gave us in the last report in December, okay? Then the second one in from the left is the average trade estimate. What did the market think this report was going to say? And then finally, way on your left is the actual numbers that the USDA gave us. So let's just kind of go through those real quickly. Here we are for harvested acres. Remember, with the type of fall that we had, everybody was thinking that the harvested acres were going to do what? Go down. Well, the USDA went down, but not quite as much as what the trade, so 81.5 is the harvested acre number that they gave us on corn. On soybeans, likewise, actually the trade was thinking 75.6, 75.5, pretty much unchanged. USDA gave us a little bit of support there in the fact that they took this down 500,000 acres on the harvested side of soybeans. So that's part of the yield equation. The other thing is the yield per acre. In December, the USDA, and this was actually a November number, wasn't updated in December, but that's the last report. The nationwide yield on corn at 167. The trade was looking not only for the acres to go down, but also the yield to go down. And what did the USDA do? They raised it a bushel. So you see, this is a big deal, because this is 1.8 bushel higher than what the trade was expecting. Now, offset slightly by the slight reduction of 300,000 corn acres, but that was a little bit negative. But don't give up hope on corn, because when we get to the bottom of the page, I'll tell you why. Soybeans, 46.9 in November and December. Trade was looking for a slight decrease to 46. And the USDA was kind enough to take soybean yield up a half a bushel per acre. Their justification on both, we took the bad acres away, so the acres that were harvested yielded what?
Better.
Better. That's USDA mentality. When we bring then the yield and the harvested acres together, we look at total corn production, 13.66 in November, December. Trade was looking for that to drop to about 13.5. USDA came out at 13.69, 31 million bushel higher than what we were in December, and substantially higher than what the than what the trade was thinking. So, you know, if you're kind of getting the feel here, well, geez, this just fits right in with UTEC because he's always bearish, right? And so far these numbers are a little bit negative. So yes.
How does the standing crop in North Dakota and up north fit into that picture? Where are those acres at? In it or out?
We'll get there, okay? We'll get there in just a second, but that's an excellent question, because we do have, and the USDA, believe it or not, did address that, but just save that thought and we'll answer it here in just a minute. So total production, 13.66, we talked about that on corn. Soybeans, 3.55, trade was looking for that to come down slightly, 3.51. USDA came out actually with an 8 million bushel increase from November, December, and quite a bit higher than where the trade was thinking. So if you noticed when this report first came out at 11 o'clock on Friday, what did the market do? We crashed pretty hard. I mean, we weren't down the limit or anything, but definitely negative, because when they looked at these production numbers, they said, oh my God, this isn't at all what we were thinking. But then when we came down to the carryouts, and this is our ending stocks or carryouts, you can call it either thing, this is what's projected to be left over on August 31st, 2020. In December, 1.91 on corn. Trade was looking for a pretty substantial decrease because remember they were looking for a smaller crop. And they were not looking for the USDA to do a lot with demand. Well, unfortunately, the USDA did a lot of changes with corn, and we'll get to those also in a minute. In fact, they went back to a year ago, to 2018, and changed the production number for 2018. So then they had to, of course, that's kind of dominoes ahead to everything here. So trade was looking for 1.75. USDA came out lower than December, but only about 18 million bushel. So it's a step in the right direction, but it basically means we still have about a 1.9 billion bushel carryout, and that's what's left over on August 31st. So are we short corn? No. Not in the eyes of the marketplace. Soybeans, 475, the ending stock number in December. The trade was looking for a pretty substantial decrease. Smaller crop, and they were hoping that the USDA might be a little more aggressive on demand because of this phase one China thing coming. Well, the USDA decided we're going to wait and see, and they left the ending stock number unchanged at 475. Now that's half of what it was a year ago, but it's still too much. So overall, you know, that's a little bit negative. What about the world? We'll go through that a little bit later, but ending stocks for the world, this is now million metric ton. 300 million metric ton in December. Trade was looking for that to go down because if the U.S. crop is smaller, the U.S. is a big part of that, so then world stocks should go down. Well, we came out a little bit higher than what the trade was thinking at 297, but still lower than December, meaning the world is using more corn than it's producing right now, right? Is that potentially friendly down the road?
Yes.
Potentially. Soybeans, 96.4. Trade was looking for it to be a little bit smaller, but 96.67. It's close to what we were thinking, a little bit more than what we were in December. And that really has to do with what's going on in South America, which we'll talk about a little bit later. As far as the South American crop estimates for production, left unchanged from December on all areas. 50 million metric ton corn out of Argentina, left unchanged. 53 on soybeans out of Argentina, unchanged. 101 on Brazilian corn, unchanged. 123 on Brazilian beans, unchanged. We'll talk about what those numbers mean as we get to the world situation. Now, the very bottom part, and then we'll move on because you're probably getting tired of looking at this slide. You know, you don't have to be so honest. I give him grief every time he gives in the office, so I deserve that, right?
You're doing fine.
Okay. here's where things get a little bit interesting in my mind. And you're not hearing a lot of talk about this in the marketplace. But let's look at the December 1 stocks in all positions. This is supposedly what's left all over the place. In December of a year ago, 11.94 billion bushel of corn on hand. Trade was looking for that to be about 11.51. USDA came in at 11.39. Now that's the first number you see up here where the USDA was lower than what the trade was thinking, right? Now this is still a pretty significant number for this time of the year on December 1, but comparing to a year ago, if my math is right, that's almost 600 million bushel less. So not only is the world using more corn than it produced in the last year, what is happening in the U.S.? Are stocks building or getting smaller? Is that potentially friendly? Potentially, especially depending on what happens now with phase 1. What if China comes in and buys some corn, because the market's really not expecting that right now? So there's some potential here. Now this is not wildly bullish. Guys, this is not $4 or $5 cash corn. Maybe 4, but it's not wildly bullish, but it could be supportive. But we're going to have to watch this thing very closely. What about soybeans? Last year in December, 3.75 billion on hand on December 1. This year the USDA came out at 3.25, slightly higher than the average trade estimate, but once again, bean stocks are getting smaller. Now they were way too big a year ago, so that's not quite as friendly as corn, but you know, it's a step in the right direction. Don't you love technology? All I have to do is touch it and it works. Okay, your question on what about these unharvested acres? First of all, I need to show you that this is an important piece, and we talked about this at our last meeting. This January crop report, all of the data in here is 100% from who?
Us.
100% farmer reporting. If you don't like the numbers, don't blame Washington in this case. Nothing was checked as far as field surveys for the January final crop production. It's surveys with the farmers. Now on the grain stock side, it's also with farmers, but it's also with elevators like New Visions, where they send out a survey saying what are your stocks in all positions, and we send it in, and that's the way it works. So that's an important piece to keep in mind. You realize as soon as the meeting's over, this thing's going to work just fine.
It's Monday Madness, Dan.
Is that right? This might be a little bit out of line, and I moved this slide around 10 times over the weekend because I wasn't sure where it fit in. But I decided to leave it here because this was like the number 3 slide by the USDA in their packet of 49 pages. So I'm thinking they thought it was important. And this is a heads up for you guys for the coming year, okay? Just a reminder, because we tend to forget things. But this looks at the principal crops planted, and there's about 8 principal crops that the USDA uses. Of course, corn, beans, wheat, cotton, sorghum, all those, and then a few minor ones that we would consider. But I just want you to look at, here are the totals of the principal crops. And you see for most years, everything gets planted, right? Now, 2012 was a little bit different. Does anybody remember what prices were like then? Big time, right? That was the golden age of agriculture. We were never going to have $3 corn again. It's going to be 5 and 6 and 7. Remember that? And we had a big increase of 10 million. But for the most part, acres are pretty consistent. But look at what happened last year in 2019. What happened? We didn't plant 16 million acres. Is that a big deal? Is that a trend that we're not going to do that again this year? What's probably going to happen this year? We're going to go back to these type of numbers? It depends on the weather, but I just got a feeling, we're going to try real hard, aren't we? So, I think the USDA, in putting this near the front of their presentation, said, folks, everybody's concentrating on what's in the bin, what's in the field, how high prices are going to go this year. Don't forget, you're going to plant another crop. And there's a good chance that acres of corn and soybeans in the coming year are gonna do what? Don't forget about that. We'll talk about that when we look at the new crop price charts. Okay, the question about unharvested acres. This also came out from the USDA. And first of all, I know I put jabs at the USDA many times about their numbers and stuff, but I will tell you that they were very honest in this report, saying this was the most difficult report they've ever had to put together. And they do not feel comfortable with these numbers because of the harvest, because of the growing season, but they did the best that they could. I think they really did try. This came out as part of the report that because of the unharvested acres when this information was gathered, these states will be resurveyed: Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. Now, what happened in this report with these numbers? What happened in this report is they went to the farmers with unharvested acres and said, what are your intentions? Are those acres lost, or are you planning to harvest them? And the farmers said, we plan on harvesting them. Next question from the USDA, what do you think they will yield? So apparently the producers were not as negative as what we thought they should be, because in this report apparently they didn't cut those yields way back. These will be resurveyed. We're not sure. We're thinking it may be, honestly, are these acres going to be harvested by March?
No.
Probably not. I mean, this could be something. So they didn't put a date when they're going to be resurveyed, but they will be resurveying these states. Somewhere here, did I lose a slide? Yeah, I did. Right here. Yes.
Is there any possible way they're gonna slip those acres either into our planted March or into, come out in September and say, whoops, they add them 12 million or whatever billion acres of corn into our harvested corn?
No, I don't
You don't
think
think
so.
they will?
I think the harvested acres that they used assumes that the unharvested acres will be harvested.
Okay.
Now, if they weren't harvested, we talked about this at our last meeting, even though they're in the field, the USDA did take an estimate of what was unharvested, what they thought the yield was going to be, and that is in this report. Not in the yield, because it's not harvested, it's where?
Farm store.
It's in your stocks. Let's be honest. It doesn't matter if it's in the bin or if it's in the field, it's on the farm, right? And that's their methodology. That's what they've always done. This slide, I apologize, slipped through. This is supposed to go ahead of the last one. Here's what the USDA, these are all slides from their packet. As of this report, 8% of all the corn acres in the United States were unharvested when this report was put together. Is that significant? Potentially, yes. So they were very honest in saying, we don't know what these are going to be. And until spring or these are harvested, we really don't know. 2% on soybeans. Now, that's not as big a number, but it could be significant. The reason they put these dates up here is they have chronological 16 through 19 here, but 2009 was the last year that we had problems with harvest, okay? And in 2009, on December, for the final crop report in January, 9.9% of the corn acres were unharvested. So you see, we're very close to 2009, but a lot of people want to compare it to that, but it's not quite as bad. 3% of beans were unharvested in 2009, 2% this year. This could be an issue, but we're not going to know for a little while just what it may mean.
Is that percent of planted acres or percent of what they assume will be harvested acres?
No, percent of planted. So like on corn, that's a good question. Like on corn, you'd have to assume that, I don't know for sure what we have in planted acres this year, 89 million or something like that. So it'd be of that percentage. So it's significant, potentially significant. Now, if we have an absolute terrible winter, and let's say half of those acres go to zero, at some point in time we should see that reflected. But I heard an interview from a farmer that farms both South Dakota, North Dakota, Aberdeen and North is what he said his acres were, and he's a fairly significant farmer. And they asked him, So, how you doing on harvest? He said, we hope to get finished by next week. This was about a week ago that the interview was on the radio. Some of you may have heard it was on Agriton. And the guy says, so the Chip said, well, how things going? He said, not bad. He said, we're going to leave about 50 to 70 rows on the edge of the field with corn drifts, but everything else is being harvested. Test weight is okay, and moisture is about 20%. Guy was not down at all. So maybe we thought it was going to be a little bit worse than what they thought. Just one person, but we'll see how it goes from there. Here's the corn yield map from last Friday. This compares it to a year ago. And I wish they would have did it comparing it to the November, but they went a year ago. So, for instance, nationwide, last year we had a yield of 176.4. This year now, raised 1 bushel up to 168. Minnesota last year was 182. This year 174, which I think is total hogwash, okay? From the November crop report until last Friday, the USDA raised the Minnesota corn yield 4 bushel per acre statewide. You think that's bad? They took Iowa up 6. I'm not believing it, but what do we know about these USDA numbers? What's the market going to do with them? Is the market going to believe them? Yeah. The only state really that went the direction we thought was South Dakota, where they took the yield from November until last Friday down 10 bushel per acre. Otherwise, she's seeing slight increases. They took North Dakota up 3 bushel. And look at this crop that's still in the field. Yes?
Is that a misprint on Oregon and Washington?
In Arizona?
Oh, it probably is. I don't know.
237 bushel average?
Well-
Why am I growing corn here?
But,
They grow it, don't
well, that's the thing. Percentage of U.S. production, what would that amount to? Very, 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 very small.
Wow, 237.
It's all irrigated.
Well, it's all irrigated and you know, it's pretty much climate controlled, you know. I didn't even notice that, quite honestly, but I'd say a bigger thing has to do with the fact that just very, very few acres. And if they happen to check the right plots, you know, they may do that. That's a good question. I'll ask somebody about that. Maybe give the USDA a call, but I got a feeling I know what the answer will be.
In the past, the National Corn Growers Growing Contest usually gets irrigated winners from like Washington. and
Is that right?
Yeah.
It isn't this where a lot of the seed production tends to be? You know, it's pretty much climate control. They don't worry so much about frost and those type of things.
I think it's accurate, Dan, from
Really?
history, yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
In this report, you notice, you know, the Eastern Corn Belt where we had a lot of problems, you know, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio down 20 plus bushel from a year ago. Those guys had issues. But here's the other thing that's really strange. From the November report until last Friday's report, every one of these yields went up. So we'll see. If the USDA is wrong with the yield, at some point in time, we should see a surprise in the grain stocks report down the road, right? Finding less corn than what we thought we had. Yep, goes, all I have to do is threaten to come over there. This looks at the corn production. Remember, the production number is harvested acres and yield. And this is why I think the market was kind of leaning the way they were, looking for a smaller production number on corn, because we see that 5 out of the last 7 years, actually 5 out of the last 6 years before last Friday, the corn production number from the USDA versus what the trade was thinking came in where? Higher or lower? Here's lower, so you see, pretty consistent. Before this year, 5 of the last 6 years, the trade estimate was higher than the USDA. So that's why they were expecting a higher one. You see, this was the biggest miss by the trade, third biggest miss in history. So they were leaning the wrong direction, but the market recovered fairly well, and I think that's somewhat supportive. Here's our soybean yield, down 3.2 bushel per acre nationwide this year versus a year ago, now at 47.4. In Minnesota, we are down 5 bushel from a year ago, and actually from November until last Friday, they dropped the Minnesota bean yield 1 bushel per acre. Now explain that to me. We took our corn up 4 and our beans down 1. Usually conditions are somewhat similar, but That's what they gave us, that's what we'll work with now.
Dan?
Yes.
In South Carolina, their average yield is 29 bushel. Is that what I see? Or, yeah.
What, 26 right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guessing so.
They put the 3 down, and you add the 2 together.
Well,
That must be cheap land to farm.
well, but I think there again, there are some areas that had some pretty tough weather conditions.
No, but the average would be 29.
Well, from a year ago,
Oh, okay.
yeah. You know, and in these areas here, I mean, they don't worry about frost, what do they worry about? Hurricanes and drought. Yeah, so, you know, if you had some areas that were affected by that would definitely have an impact there. Soybean production, you know, we looked at corn, and prior to this year, 4 out of the last 4 years, the trade had overestimated the USDA production number in January. So this is why I think they were leaning that direction too, thinking that with the challenges we had this year was just another slam dunk, they were gonna come in lower. This actually came in to be the second highest missed by the trade. USDA came in quite a bit higher. So there's questions, right? And the USDA was very honest. They're not 100% sure of these numbers. Here's how the grain stocks compare, and then we'll look at that state by state here in just a second. You know, and on corn, I should point out, you know, when it's 0 here, that would mean if the trade was right on with where the USDA came out. You see, it's been kind of a mixed bag and can go either way on corn stocks, so the trade wasn't real sure about that. Here are our corn stock numbers, and these compare last year to this year. Last year total corn stocks 11.9, this year 11.38. You can see Minnesota has less corn on hand than a year ago. The states in yellow here have less, and I did notice this, I didn't put this chart together, but they did screw up here because South Dakota should be yellow. You see stocks are also down in South Dakota and they got their own color there, so somebody had a slip there. 1.232 billion bushel of corn on hand in Minnesota, total stocks. In this report, they also look at what's on the farm. Last year on December 1st, 7.4 billion bushel on the farm, this year 7.1. So in other words, 63% of the corn on hand on December 1st was still on the farm. That's where the majority of it is, right? And I thought that was a little bit bearish, and then I went back and looked at last year. Last year was 62.4. So it's fairly consistent. Now what about Minnesota? Last year, 73.9% of the corn in Minnesota was on the farm on December 1st. This year, 75.5. You guys are all waiting for what? Higher prices? You can't say better basis levels this year, can you? No. So we have to kind of be careful there. Pretty consistent, but quite a bit on hand on the farm yet. Here's our soybean stocks versus the trade estimate going into the report. And you see before this year, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row. The USDA bean stocks came in lower than what the trade was thinking. And this year, it was the second highest miss in history. Do we find a surprise in that down the road? Soybean stocks nationwide, 3.7 billion bushel a year ago, 3.2 this year. You can kind of see that most of the states, and they goofed up on this too because these states all should be yellow. Everybody should have less beans than a year ago because of the fact that stocks are down that much. You know, in Minnesota, nationwide, 46.9% of the beans on the farm on December 1st. In Minnesota, 56.3% of beans on the farm. Last year, that was 59%. So actually, a few more beans have moved. That's still significant. And to me, that could say something, maybe basis implications as we get farther into this crop year, both on corn and beans. There's a lot of stuff still sitting where? In your bins, right? Okay, as we get into the supply and demand tables, this was a slide from the USDA, and this is what I meant when I said they went way back to 2018 and they didn't explain how they came up with these numbers. They just said, oh, by the way, we are reducing 2018 production 80 million bushel in this report. And then because they came in with a smaller production number, they also adjusted the feeding residual. 186 million. No explanation. These are just now the numbers. So I put this slide up here because as we get into the supply and demand table, of course, they incorporate the numbers in. So we go back to last year's supply and demand table, which should have been put to bed and closed on August 31st, 2019, right? Except now the government can come in and change things. So they lower production 80 million. They take 186 million out of feed residual, and add, if you balance these out with Washington math, you take 107 million bushel and increase your ending stock number from last August 31st. Saying that now, we had told you it was 2.114 billion, now we're raising that up to 2.221. Well, you say, that doesn't matter, that's water under the bridge. No, this now becomes the beginning number for this crop year. So you see, you bring this 107 million back in. Follow me there? Now, what else did they do? Well, we talked, they did a little bit of playing with planted acres from their last report, down to 89.7. We talked about the 300,000 harvested acres that came out. Some of those were in Minnesota, by the way. They raised the yield 1 bushel, 167 to 168. That put 31 million bushel, you know, with the change of the acres, the increase in yield, that only added 31 million bushel of production. The kicker was what they did to last year. And then in this year, if you can keep up with the USDA, and I apologize, this is confusing for me too. Here they cut feed residual 186 million a year ago, and increased it 250 this year. Justification? More hogs, more cattle, more chicken. We talked about that last year, right? So we have to keep in mind the biggest part of this category, even though we want to try and call it feeding, the biggest variable is residual. And that's a number pretty much the USDA pulls out of the air. They also reduced exports 75 million bushel in this report. So when we put all of these numbers together, all of the changes from 2018, all of the changes in this report, the net effect was a change of 18 million bushel versus the December estimate. So now I see here where we end up with that 1.892. Everybody follow me there?
Are they done playing with last year's crop?
I would hope so, but remember way back, probably two sets of meetings ago, when we had that stock surprise where they kind of lost 300 million bushel? We knew there was going to be a correction coming, but we didn't expect it to be like this. But that's the USDA. So, like the numbers, hate the numbers, it's what the market's going to trade.
And the second thing is, they'll probably play with net for the 19 crop for at least another year.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, as we get into the stocks report in March, you want my gut feeling? You don't want to know what I think, do you? Can I tell you? I think we're either going to lose more harvested acres or we're going to lose yield in the reports down the road as we find out where this unharvested stuff ends up. Because some of this stuff, let's say it's only 50 to 70 rows of a field that's now in 4 foot of snow. We're going to harvest all that stuff, right?
It's going to get pulled down.
Probably going to get pulled down, probably going to be some loss. And here's the other thing. I seen a report a week or so ago from the United States Grain Quality Council. Sounds impressive, doesn't it? And it took every category of corn, moisture, test weight, protein, starch, everything usable in that kernel of corn, and compared it to the last 5 years. And what it showed is that, no surprise to us, is that the 2019 crop on moisture was what? Higher than normal, higher than the last 5 years. And test weight was?
Lower.
You guys are smart.
I harvest.
So let's just think here for a minute. The farmer is called for the grain stocks information, 100% honest. What do you have in your bins? And he looks at his capacity chart, the bins are all full, and he said, here's what we got. Now, if he hauled 58-pound corn out of those bins a year ago, and this year it's 56, is he gonna notice any different in his bushels? And you see, that's not gonna come up until this stuff starts moving, right? And right now, we said that 63% of the corn's still on the farm. Could there be a mistake there? But here's the problem. Next stocks report comes in March, and then we don't have one until June. And if we don't find this problem until June, what is the USDA going to say at that point if we've planted 94 million acres of corn? Don't worry, it's in the field, right? So you see, even if it's not, it may not be intentional, but this gives them time to correct their mistakes, okay? Here's the important piece I think you guys should be aware of. They basically left the carryout unchanged, down 18 million, so 1.892. We are not going to run out of corn this year. They left the average price at $3.85, 24 cents better than a year ago. In your marketing plan, then, what do I tell you every year? When you get to this average price or higher, what should you be thinking about doing?
Well,
I'm not talking sweeping the bins. When you can sell $3.85 or higher, you need to be thinking about possibly laying a little bit of risk off. We're going to get to the bid page for New Vision here in several slides, and we'll compare that. So keep that 385 number in mind, okay? A lot of numbers here. I just want to give you a little bit of a perspective from another company. This is from R.J. O'Brien. Here's the USDA balance sheet of 1.892. The RJO, I got a lot of trust in their people. They've got some really good people. Rick Feltus, who used to be with Refco years ago, you may be familiar with that name, still does research. Randy Middlestead, two of the best people in the world as far as analysis. They think the carryout could actually be about 50 million less, down to 1.837. And if we look at where the differences is, they think the feeding number is still too low. Because we are really pushing the feeding side because we're all getting ready to do what with our meat?
Sell it to China.
Sell it to China. Now, here's the other thing that goes along with that slide that the USDA had on unplanted acres for this year. Remember, 16 million acres didn't get planted? RJO is in the camp of everybody else thinking we plant about 5 million more corn acres this year. And even if we have higher demand, which is built into this table for next year, based on what we're going to do with phase one with China, what happens to our carryout for next year? 2.3, I seen another one from a different company at 2.5 billion. Does that mean the corn prices for new crop are going to be higher? So if you've got, that's probably the most important stuff we can get out of this thing. I realize you're worried about the stuff in the bin and getting that stuff marketing, but don't forget about the stuff you haven't even planted yet. Because if this comes true, our corn price a year from now is probably not going to be 24 cents higher, it's going to be probably what?
It's low.
This is why the USDA took the corn export number down 75 million. Here's where we're at so far through November, and this is the last monthly report that they had. Here's our current crop year. This is the last 5. You see why they took exports down? Is it because we're too expensive? No, we've been price competitive all year. But as we get to the global side, we'll see that there's other people in the world that keep raising more and more corn, and they don't care what they get for it, they just raise it to sell it. That's piece one. USDA adjusted that in the report, down 75 million. I don't know that that comes back. We're getting too far into the year. Even if China comes in and buys some corn, we have to average weekly inspections of corn now right at 30 million per week from now and every week until the end of August to meet the USDA number that they just lowered. So there's potential the export number could even slip a little bit more. There's possibility so that maybe we can meet it, but probably not exceed it. Here's ethanol, the other big piece of corn demand. We've looked at this chart before. There's a lot of stuff. The green line is the weekly production of ethanol. The gray line is ethanol stocks. And you can see we really took a dive here because ethanol stocks got to be an all-time high earlier this year, midsummer. And when ethanol stocks got that high, we had to slow down the amount of ethanol we were making or slow our grind down because margins got real ugly. And that's when you had ethanol plants talking about or even shutting down. So we did the right thing. We slowed the industry down, way down. Stocks started falling. And then once they started falling, margins started getting better. And what did we do? We cranked it right back up. And then we took off grinding more and more corn for ethanol. Here's this red line here is where we need to be at or above to meet the current USDA production for ethanol use of corn. And you can see for the last 8 weeks we've been well above that. But as we went higher, what happened to our ethanol stocks? See, the industry's gotten so much better about getting more ethanol out of every bushel that we can gear it up real quick. And as that happened, we go to our next slide here. You see, here's when we rebounded. Here, margins are ugly. Here's break even right here on black. We were negatives. We slowed things down. Then they started getting better. And now we cranked it back up. And now what have happened to margins again? Today, every ethanol plant around is probably losing money. Are they going to shut down? I don't know. Now, there is some hope here. Because when we talk about the China thing, I'm optimistic about what they might be doing with DDGs and ethanol. This is a slide that came out of an article from the Wall Street Journal just the other day. By the way, if anybody has a few $1 billion they'd like to lose or use, ADM is willing to sell their entire ethanol division. ADM. They want out. Because this is ethanol prices for the last 3 years. And what's ethanol been doing? And the price of corn did what? Well, up 24 cents, right? Ethanol going down, corn going up, what does that do to your margins? ADM says, you want to buy it, it's yours. Ain't this some pretty stuff?
White Cubs.
This is Chinese corn. Yeah, it does. I painted the negative picture on ethanol as far as margins being negative, but here's the hope. I think we're going to see China in phase 1 buy both DDGs and ethanol from the U.S. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, remember China had a 5-year plan to get their entire country up to a 10% ethanol blend by 2020. What year is this? Well, they haven't made it. So about a week or two ago, they sent out a press release saying they were scrapping that plan. In other words, they're not going to build an ethanol industry. But what if part of phase 1 is buying what? Buying the ethanol to get them to the 10%, which would make sense, right? Because we've got it to sell, folks. This could be a supportive thing. Now, I don't know that it means we use a lot more corn for ethanol, but it could definitely help margins and help that industry because that's next to feeding, that's right up there as one of the biggest sources of demand for corn. DDGs would also be helped by this, by the way.
You know, one other thing.
Yeah.
When you consider the shipping, would it be better for China to buy our corn, build their ethanol plants, than to get ethanol and DDGs there? Or are they going to buy our DDGs and our ethanol instead of our corn?
Don't tell them that. We want them to let us do it. We've got the industry. Yeah, you're right. And that's what they do with soybeans. They import the raw beans, and then they make the oil for their cooking and meal for their livestock. But if they really want to, you know, what drove the 5-year plan for China to go to a 10% ethanol blend? What drove that? Pollution. Has the pollution gotten any better? No. So the quickest way for them to address their pollution situation and save face in the world, and quite honestly, save the health of their people, is to do what? Just buy ethanol. Because it's going to take years to build that industry up to the point that they need it.
But then you gotta add India to it too.
Right. there's some potential there. There is some bright possibilities as far as demand. Here's
So
our
we
support-
can get $7 corn.
No. Marshall, we've got to get to $4 corn first. Here's our bean balance table. Remember all those changes, and they went back to last year. Well, they made a few changes on last year on the beans, but it was pretty minor. Actually reduced the ending stocks from 913 down to 909, which moves across to here. Here's the planted and harvested acres that they took off. They increased yield. You know, with all of this that they did, they only changed the production number on soybeans 8 million bushel versus their previous estimate. So it's pretty much left unchanged. And on the demand side, they made absolutely no changes. And some people thought, well, you know, we've been doing a little better on soybean exports, and if phase one kicks in, you know, is China going to take more beans? But the USDA said we're going to wait and see. And I think the reason they did that is because they looked down to the southern hemisphere and see what's coming at the world in Brazil and Argentina. And quite honestly, there's a wall of beans about to hit the market. They left carryout unchanged at 475. What will be left over on August 31st? And what did they do with the bean price?
They used to.
$8.85 up to $9. So if you have soybeans that you're waiting for a marketing opportunity, where do you want to start watching things real close? $9? You realize last week we traded there a few times? Yeah, but this China thing, it's going to just keep going up, right? Be careful. Because some of this China stuff, I think, is built into the market right now as we speak. And that's why I'm a little bit fearful that as we get into the actual signing and getting into the document, there might be a little bit of disappointment. I'm not saying this market can't go higher, but I think we've built a fair amount into anticipation. We looked at corn, and RJO said, we think the corn ending stock number is going to be smaller than the USDA, but look at what they're seeing on beans. USDA is at 474, 475. Some of that's just Washington math. RJO thinks this carryout number is going to go back over 500 million. What's the difference? They don't think we're going to make the current export number that the USDA has in at 1775. They think they're 25 million too high. Why? Because Brazil's got an all-time record crop in the field. You say, well, that's a few weeks or months down the road. No, Brazil is harvesting new crop beans today. So even with phase one, let's be honest. If beans are available and cheaper in Brazil, where is China going to buy beans? That's why they want the freedom to do what the market tells them to do in the Great Trade Agreement. That does not mean they're not going to take 40 billion bushel of ag products out of the U.S. It just may not be soybeans this time of the year. For next year, we looked at corn. For next year, RGO is also looking for a substantial increase, about 9 million acres of soybeans. Remember, they had up 5 on corn, up 9 on beans. That's 14 of the 16, right? If weather cooperates, those acres are going to get planted. But they are looking for demand to be better next year based on phase one, because there will be holes in South American crop where China will buy from the U.S. And that, in fact, if that happens, would keep carryout about unchanged around 480 in their opinion. Is that bullish? Is that $13 beans? No. It's kind of what we have this year. It's $8.75 to $9 beans. And if by chance we have a slippage in demand and South America is more aggressive, we want to be a little bit careful. So don't forget about new crop.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
I'm hearing little stories about the Australian smoke coming into South America. Any idea is that can that do much damage?
For this year's crop, I'd say no. The crop is pretty much made. Like I said, they're starting to harvest in some areas now. We do know, though, that even in the U.S., when we've had fires and stuff, if you get smoke in the atmosphere and start blocking sunshine, does that affect crop?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I hadn't heard of that. Well, that's going a long ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
Australia is a whole other issue. I think, you know, Our thoughts and prayers with those people. Wow, that's unreal, isn't it? What would you do if the fire's coming from all directions and your choice is to sitting out or going to the ocean? You know, you see these places where they're hauling people out by ships just to get them literally out of the fire. It's nasty. Soybeans on, you know, we looked at the monthly recap on corn. We were way down at the bottom. You see, we were starting out pretty poor on beans. Here's the current year, but you know, we've made it kind of a nice little bump up. But as we get into January forward, why do our exports fall off?
South America.
Is that going to happen this year? Yep. Other demand area for soybeans is crush. And you can see we started out real good. Our October number higher than expected. People got all excited. And then reality kind of set in November. And you see, if we look at what's projected for the year, 2.105, that's higher than where we've been for the last 5 years. So in other words, we can't have the crush slipping below previous year's reports, can we? And with the crop in Argentina, that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. So the crush, we have to wait and see. We've geared it up. Margins are okay right now, but there's no guarantee of what comes down the road. Let's go to the world for just a second. We've looked at this chart before. This is total world corn production, all countries, and total world demand on corn. You can see how the two are almost together. Stocks aren't building, stocks aren't going a lot smaller. So we're basically, all the corn that we raise, what do we do each year in the world? We're pretty much using it. Keep this slide in mind as we look at beans. Any difference? This is world soybean production, this is world soybean use. What's happened the last 2 years?
Lost demand.
Lost demand to where? China. This has nothing to do with President Trump's trade war with China. This is what? African swine fever. Is it fixed today?
No.
Has the world slowed down soybean production? What did we just look at? What does the U.S. probably intend to do with their soybean production in the coming year, 2020?
5 million more.
Record crop out of South America. We plant 9 million more acres of beans. Do you see why I'm telling you, you better be careful on your new crop marketing on beans? You say, yeah, but this might get fixed. How many years is it going to take for China to rebuild their swine herd? They lost 40 to 50% of 700 million head of hogs. It can take time, right? This is a caution. Now maybe we won't plant 9 million more acres of soybeans this year. We'll plant all the cannabis. How about that? Then we can all be happy, right? Huh? What's that? No, that's no good either. It's going to be too much.
An
Huh?
article about the next year and the problems they're gonna have
Really?
with the governments
Yeah.
gonna check them a lot harder.
Yep. Yep. And rightfully so. Okay, after we kind of get a 51,000 foot view of corn and soybean production and demand for the world, I thought this chart was kind of interesting in a lot of ways. And I want to start with corn. This kind of looks at a history for the last 10 years on corn production in the world. Once again, this is 1 million metric tons, so don't get confused with the bushels. Just look at the trend of the numbers. And you can see total world production, 830 in 2010, now 1.1 billion. You know, it's going up. But let's look and be realistic here. Where's it coming from? And here's the U.S. 316 2 years ago, 347 this year. Has U.S. corn production really changed much in the last 10 years? No, but the world production's been going up. So where's it coming from? Look at Brazil. 57 million metric ton a year ago, this year 101. That's almost what?
Unfair.
Argentina, 25 million metric ton 10 years ago, this year 50. That is what? Ukraine, 11 million metric ton 10 years ago, this year 35. That is what? 3 times. Do you see what's happened in the world? Is this gonna change? It puts kind of a monkey on our back to really focus on marketing, right? Because the rest of the world is getting our genetics, our technology, they're producing more. And when they produce corn in Brazil and Argentina, what are they gonna do with it? They're gonna export it. That's the biggest problem why our exports are where they're at this year. We can blame the dollar, we can blame the trade war. The fact of the matter is there's been more produced in the world in areas where they don't care about the price. If they raise it, they're gonna sell it. And their outlet is export because they don't have the domestic industry. Now that may be changing in Brazil because there's a push in Brazil by China to build more ethanol plants so that they can get DDGs and ethanol out of China. So I think China's kind of scrapping the idea of building a lot of plants in the country. They've realized, you know, if we've got the corn in Brazil, let's process it and we'll probably send our people in to build a plant and run the plant, but then we'll take the ethanol and DDGs from there. What about soybeans? 263 million metric ton 10 years now up to 337, pretty substantial increase in soybean production. And all of that increase in production was being built bigger and bigger and bigger to serve what? Demand where? And what happened to that picture? Now all of a sudden demand isn't going higher every year, it's kind of sideways to drastically lower. Do you remember what that demand chart showed? U.S. soybean crop 10 years ago, 90 million metric ton, this year 96. Have we changed much on soybean production? Nope. What about Brazil? 75 10 years ago, this year 123. Look at this, folks. 123 for them, 96 for us. Who's the biggest soybean producer in the world now? That's changed. What about Argentina? 49 to 53, not a lot of change there. Ukraine isn't listed here, but even in Ukraine, they're raising a few more soybeans than what they were in the past. So I just think it's important to understand this, to have a picture of what's going on worldwide. Okay, now on Brazil, and I stuck this weather thing in because here's the area to kind of keep an eye on with Brazil. Rio Grande do Sul, probably about their second most productive state. All of these tans and yellows and reds, they're dry. So when you look at weather in South America, you know, you see the northern part of the country extremely wet, the central part of the country, Mato Grosso do Sul, Paraná, Santa Catarina, those are all, they all raise soybeans too, and their conditions are what? Very good. So this is the area to watch. Paraguay and Rio Grande do Sul is where the dryness is in South America. And it's dry, but they're getting some rains, and it seems like even in spite of the dry areas, crops going to be good. Here's a chart that shows Brazil weekly loadings or exports by commodity. This color here, I guess kind of a brown, is soybeans. Green is corn. Meal and pellets are the purple. Meal and pellets are just kind of like a flatliner. But you look at soybeans, every year when we get about towards the end of January, what happens to bean exports? Every year, without exception. When they harvest, what are they going to do? Is that going to change with phase one in China? Now, the other thing is, when they start exporting beans, what tends to happen with the corn exports? They go down. Two reasons. First of all, the capacity is shifted at the ports to beans. Second reason is they are usually about out of what? Corn. So there is some potential. You know, if China would come in and buy a little bit of corn, South America is probably about out of bullets. We could see that support U.S. exports a little bit, but basically the bottom line is this export thing, it's about to go south like it does every year. Nothing new. It's not going to change with a phase one agreement out of China. Here's Argentina, another exporter that we have to compete against. Here, the black is corn. And look what's happening to corn exports out of Argentina when you return here. They are about out of what? Exportable corn. So if the world needs to buy corn in the next couple of months here, we could see some rebound in the U.S., but like I said earlier, we've got a lot of stuff to get done just to meet the current USDA projection. I get in trouble every time I make a political statement, but I couldn't help but include this because I think it's so good. And I was a Robin Williams fan. Great comedian, right? Anybody else like Robin Williams?
Yeah,
Mrs. Doubtfire?
yeah.
They're
Good
just-
morning, Vietnam.
Good Morning Vietnam?
Impromptu.
Yeah, great guy. This is one of his quotes. Politicians should wear sponsor jackets like NASCAR drivers, then we know who owns them. Is there some reality in that?
Very active.
But we're not going to change that, so we just move on. Let's go to the world and talk a little bit about pork. Now, I don't want you guys to get all excited if you're still a hog farmer, but this is all converted to US dollars. This isn't a difference of currencies. Hog prices in China right now are $215 under it. Who wants to raise hogs for that? Would that be fun? Hog prices in the US, $50. Their hog price is 5 times ours right now. Do you think African swine fever is real? Do you think they got hungry people to feed? You see, we by far have the cheapest pork in the world, and they have the biggest need. I sincerely believe this is a big part of phase 1 and why they signed the agreement when they did. Is this going to be wildly bullish for the hog market?
Yes.
I'm going to say no. Because why? How long have we been talking about this? A year?
3-4 years.
But once
Well-
you lower the tariffs and stuff, Dan, we're gonna ship them pork.
Oh, I agree. But we as a industry, of a hog industry in the United States, we've been waiting for this heyday for months. And what are our coolers like? I think our freezers are pretty full.
No, they're full of that, green stuff.
Perspective, right? I'm gonna throw this thing at somebody.
Dan,
Yes,
Smithfield Foods is owned by China now,
yes.
the largest pork producer in America.
I think in the world,
According,
actually.
well,
Yeah.
okay, but Successful Farmer
Yep.
had a listing,
Yep.
one of them. What happens to that pork if they own it?
I think a lot of it ends up just getting sold in this country. It doesn't all go to China.
I'm just curious.
Why did China buy Smithfield Foods?
I don't know.
Was it for a supply of pork? No,
Good money.
no. Technology.
Uh,
How to raise better hogs quicker. That's what they wanted as a management side. Now, it's a nice, convenient outlet to have, but you know, it's that's what I've been told anyway. So we looked at exports on grain, and they're not too good. Here's our exports of 2019 in pork. Now, this is all relative, but it's up a bunch, right? And a lot of it's to China. But who's right now? Who's our number one customer of pork out of the U.S.? Mexico. And this is why I threw that political thing in there, because it grinds my butt when we're fighting about something stupid in Washington, and we've had a new trade agreement with Canada and Mexico on the table for over a year, and we're holding it up because we want to fight about a stupid impeachment. That should piss you off as farmers. Because our biggest customers are not China, they are Mexico and Canada. And now finally, that agreement has been approved by the House, sent to the Senate, but the Senate doesn't want to vote on it until they deal with the impeachment, which could last months.
They changed the language in that, and there's a good chance that Canada and Mexico will not sign.
I agree, because we've taken too long. And we've
Well, no, they
we've
changed
the
a
wording.
bunch of
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, Canada said, we're not going to sign it until the US does. And then, but we did change some of the wording in there as far as labor with Mexico, and now Mexico's having second thought, even though their Congress had previously passed it. So it's very, very frustrating. Call your congressman, chew their butt. Here's a picture out of an article last week. I had to share this because I think, once again, it's a perspective that we need to be aware of. This is a grocery store in China. This is how the consumer buys pork. Can you see your wife's doing this? Where's the cellophane in practice in sell by a certain date? This is fresh pork at a Chinese market. A little different than what we're used to. Now the next one, if anybody has a little bit of a queasy stomach, I apologize. It's not bad, but I had to include this one too. With the price of pork being $215 a hundredweight in China, they are looking for alternative meats. This is dog and cat food. Dog and cat cooked. And if you have people coming over for supper in China now, you very well may serve dog or cat because it's so much cheaper than pork.
Doesn't matter in the price.
Well, but
They serve it all the time.
yeah, but they do, but it's a price sensitive thing right now. So,
Our Korean rep in California would eat in Korea.
really, I'll never forget one time when I was in the Army, and our band was stationed in Germany, and we had this weekend job. We had to go into France to play for some big thing, put a concert on and everything. And you know, back then when an American band went into some of these smaller towns, they really tried to just treat you special because it was a big thing for them. They maybe never had an American military band before. So one Friday night we roll into this little French town. They put us up in the hotel. They invite us down for a meal, and they serve what I thought was some of the best steak I'd ever had.
Horse.
It was horse. And after they told us what it was, and they were proud of it because it was a delicacy, about half the band went out and lost their lunch. So you just couldn't get over the fact of eating black beauty, you know, but it tasted good. It's all in perspective, right? A lot of unknowns about phase one. This comes from a company out of China called JCI, and I apologize, I don't know what it stands for. Everybody calls them JCI. I probably couldn't pronounce it if I knew the words, so we'll just leave it as JCI. This is what they see happening with phase one. And remember, a lot of people are trying to pick holes in it, saying there's no way in God's green earth that China can buy $40 billion worth of U.S. ag products in 1 year. JCI says, yeah, they can. Soybeans would be here. Now, granted, you said, well, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. You said they weren't going to buy beans. No, I said they weren't going to buy beans in February and March because that's when harvest is going on in Brazil. They will buy beans from the U.S. So a large part will be beans. You notice there's a little bit of corn. You can see the color over here. There's going to be some wheat, which can be supportive. This red section is sorghum. China tends to be our #1 export buyer of U.S. sorghum. They're probably going to come back. And then, of course, we have DDGs. Look at this. You see, and that's been completely absent for the last couple of years since we've been in a trade war. So if they buy some DDGs, that's going to be good for the corn market. We see ethanol. We see nuts. We see fish. We see chicken feed. They eat anything there, right? And then, of course, there's aquatic products, fish, and there's other things. But JCI, this is a Chinese company saying, no, we fully intend to buy. Now, keep in mind, folks, this phase one, how long does this last? Forever? 2 years. I really think part of what drove China to this point, the trade war was affecting their economy. African swine fever, big hit. They need meat when? Now, or they stand the chance of their country getting a lot of unrest. In 2 years, they hope that ASF is what? Cured or gone or a lot better off, and their meat supply is rebuilding again. So, you know, we don't want to get too comfortable with this. This is good for American agriculture, but it's not the end of the road. Has China changed any of their ideology as far as communist versus democracy? We are their what? Enemy. Is that ever going to change? Not in our lifetime, probably. A little bit about weather. Remember at our last meeting we talked about, and here's the U.S., by the way, and let's just talk quickly about this. Here's the equator, and we can kind of see pretty neutral, so right now, not a lot of talk of about an El Nino or La Nina, so it could be a pretty boring year coming up, meaning that weather could be normal. If we have normal weather in 2020, do you suppose those acres are going to get planted that we didn't plant a year ago?
Yeah.
At our last meeting, we talked about, here's the United States here, we talked about this pool of water, the Gulf of Alaska. Remember, at that time, the color was this, right? Was much warmer than normal, meant mild conditions for us here. And did we have a mild December? Yeah, we did. Now, this isn't the actual temperature, but this is a change. And basically, when it's all blue here, it means the waters in the Gulf of Alaska have cooled drastically the last 3 to 4 weeks. Meaning that for the balance of the winter, we're probably going to have more what? More normal type winter conditions. But this was kind of an energy side, and they're saying don't be too concerned. They're not looking at a lot of severe and long-lasting, extremely cold blasts, and the natural gas people were really watching that. So here's what they're looking for the balance of January. Temperatures on top. We're actually looking near to above for a lot of the areas just to our south and east. Pretty much normal for us, which means we're going to have some below zero, right? Well, we're probably also going to have some 30s. And the thing that's nice is today is the 13th of January. Guys, we're almost over the hump, right? I mean, spring's coming. And for precip in January, pretty much normal, above normal to the east. And they're seeing that now. Boy, some of you see the pictures of tornadoes and stuff over the weekend. Wow, a lot of ugly stuff. And here's the month of February. Actually looking for temperatures to warm up a little bit. If we start getting warmer, tiles are running. This spring could be what?
Early.
It's going to be early, but I think we're going to get stuff planted, aren't we? I'm anticipating a better growing season this year than a year ago. That's pretty easy to say, right? Stake
Always
my
next year.
reputation on that, huh?
Always next year.
Always next year, that's right. And for precip for February, you can see actually a little bit on the drier side. Would that kind of be nice? You know, one of the fears as we went through this winter is that we went in wet, and then if we got all kinds of snow, all kinds of flooding in the spring, and maybe the good Lord's going to take care of us, right? Now, I don't have a map. I didn't include a map. I was running out of space for slides, but for what it's worth, I have seen some maps that people have put out for like March, April, and May, and people are thinking that this growing season is going to be a little bit better. Not quite as bad as what we had in the past, and odds are that these acres will get planted. So keep that in mind as we look at new crop. Okay, here's our commodity funds. Where are we at as of Friday's close? They're still short corn, about 85,000 contracts, about the same as what they were a few weeks ago. In the meantime, back in December, early part of December, about a month ago, we were shorter than corn, so they covered a little bit of their short position, and then they've kind of reestablished it as we see some of these exports scale up. One thing to keep in mind, soybeans. Where are the funds at with soybeans right now? I mean, these numbers are black. Were they long or short?
Long,
And a month ago they were what?
very short.
What have they done with their short position on beans over the last 30 days? Why would have they covered their short over the last month? What's happened?
Very short.
Trade agreement. You see, I think that a lot of this is in the market. Whoa, you say, well, beans haven't rallied, have they? No, just 80 cents a bushel. Be careful, because we could get possibly a little bit of a disappointment there. I'm not saying they're not going to buy beans, but we're on the doorsteps of a big crop out of Brazil. I think we built some of this into the market, and if China would come in and start buying U.S. beans aggressively over the next 30 days, yeah, we're probably going to go higher. But I don't know if we're going to see that with the crop in South America. They're long wheat right now, and a lot of that too is in anticipation of China buying wheat, which I think they probably will do. But once again, some of it may be in the market. Here's our nearby corn chart as of this morning. You see, for the last few weeks here, we've been pretty much range bound. We made a nice little move up as we switched to contracts, went to the March because March futures were higher. And now we've just been waiting for the trade agreement. So on nearby corn futures in Chicago, kind of been in a range of about 383 to 393. 392. So for us to be friendly corn, you know, if we see the see the agreement get signed, maybe see them buy a little corn, buy some DDGs, buy some ethanol. You know, first area we want to take out is 392. We start closing above 392, this market's probably got a little bit of life on corn. But then we're going to run into resistance probably at our October high around 402. So even though I'm friendly and optimistic corn, I'm talking guys maybe a rally at 10 to 15 cents, maybe 20 if we're lucky. Keep that in mind as we look at what the price of corn has been. RSI right now is about 55, meaning we're pretty much in equilibrium right now. This is a chart from a few weeks ago, but this looks at July corn futures on a weekly continuous basis. And I know the numbers might be a little bit hard to do, but this goes all the way back to 2015, I think. And these numbers that I've highlighted are all 425, 429, 454. And these ones in here don't have prices on, but you see they're all about 415 right here. And then last year, this would be 2018, this is 2019. Basically, it shows us that usually we get an opportunity each and every year to sell July futures up at 415 or higher. And if you look at where we're at today, that once again would be about, I think, around a 15-cent rally. Doesn't mean we can't go higher, but just be careful when we get to that point. You might want to keep a close eye on what's going on. Here's December corn for the new crop positions. We've talked a lot about the potential for increased acres, for carryouts to build back up to 2.3 to 2.5 billion. Be careful about this, because right now, today, we still have December of 2020 futures in Chicago above $4. Now, history will tell us, remember we looked at this at the last meeting, that almost every year we have an opportunity after the first of the year and between like January and June to sell December futures in around a 415 to 425 area. Once again, we're looking maybe 15 to 20 cents higher. Be careful. If we get a rally up to those levels, you might want to seriously get some protection on in some way, shape, or form. If we plant 94 million acres, have relatively normal weather, carry out goes up to 350 or 2.5, we could easily have this type of scenario by fall, right? So don't wait until the crop's made to look at doing something there.
When should we sell 2018 corn?
You know, one of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump. Stupid is, stupid does. And there's some of that out there.
I love it, yep.
Yep. I know a few people that have some too, so it's, you know, but all honesty, if you didn't need the money, you're okay. Because if you look at where prices were, I was going to tell you this, but I'll tell you now. Last January 16th, when we had this round of meetings, price of cash corn was $3.38 at New Vision. True story. What is it today? $3.85. Can you store corn for 50 cents for a year? Now here's the problem. Yeah, but.
Yeah, but. I've heard that before.
Yeah, but you had an opportunity last June of 2019 to sell $4.50. And why didn't you?
This is going to sell.
Doing fine. They finally got it right. Nearby bean sharp. You say, well, the bean market hasn't done much. December 2nd, 867. January 2nd, 949. Let's see, 33 and 49, 82 cents. Guys, this is phase one being signed. We're intended to be signed. I'm not saying we can't go higher, but you see, we're right up. Well, we made new highs, but you know we're kind of up in it. We're going sideways here. We're going to need something to. The funds have went from short, 128,000 contracts, to long. RSI is bumping up against 80 up here. That means the market's getting a little bit overbought. So be careful on beans. If you've got some old crop beans, keep a close eye. Maybe at least have a sell order in. Here's November bean futures. Carry out 475 this year. Plant more acres, 475 next year, even with increased soybean demand out of China. And we've got futures here at 980. market goes a little bit higher and we get close to $10, if we're gonna plant more bean acres, following up that crop in South America, could that be an opportunity? Keep a close eye on that. Might wanna have some protection on. Basis. We looked at this chart last time. This compares corn basis to the 3-year average. And we'll look at where we're at today in just a second here. But if we look at these blue dots, and here's southern Minnesota right here. This is New Vision's territory. This says that the corn basis today is 45 to 50 cents better than what it normally has been for the last 3 years. Is that true? Is that an opportunity?
Yes.
Yeah, but we had a short crop. It should be more than that, right?
I call.
Be careful. Here's a bid sheet. Now, before we get into this too far, I need to tell you something here. On the corn, these prices are Friday's close. Friday's close is at New Vision at all of these places. If you're willing to deliver corn to Magnolia or Worthington, you add a nickel onto these prices. Follow me? So the price of corn at Magnolia and Worthington today is what? If the market is unchanged.
$3.90.
What's the average price projection by the USDA for this crop year?
$3.85.
What are we supposed to do if corn's at 385 or higher?
Buy more.
Well. And what kind of report did we have last Friday on corn?
Bearish.
Well, neutral at best. I mean, you can find some friendly things in there, but you got to look pretty hard, right? Most of the numbers were a little bit on the negative side. Corn basis delivered to all these places is basically option price. When's the last time you had that? A year ago, that basis was 3,600 on January 16th. Cash price was 338. This year, 385, and even basis. The majority of your better price this year is strictly what? And the basis is reflective off of the short crop that we had regionally. But, remember what we said about on-farm stocks of corn in Minnesota? 46.9% on December 1 was still on the farm. Is Minnesota out of corn? So at some point, if this corn in Minnesota starts coming off the farm, suppose this might be impacted? Not today. In fact, I think for the next couple months here, corn basis could get better. But what happens as we get to May and June, if you guys got your acres planted, the spraying done, eventually that corn might do what? Are you aware now that on the rail market side, and this year, at least for right now, the corn market for New Vision is driven 100% by feed. Not by ethanol, not by exports, 100% by feed. That's why you see the premiums in the feed mills. Because we're grinding at least 40,000, some days probably 50,000 bushels of corn a day at our feed mills. That's just like a small ethanol plant. If we get enough corn, or when we get enough corn bought to get us to new crop, what's going to happen to this corn basis, or what could happen? We are seeing that happen to some of the rail and ethanol markets already. Ethanol margins are not good, so they don't want to pay any more than they have to, and the rail market is backing off, so keep that in mind. But if you have corn to do, what's the market telling you to do? Well, if you look here, 385 for nearby corn, you can go all the way out to next July, and it's going to pay you 3 cents. Can you store corn for 3 cents for 6 months? Well, you can go to August and get a nickel. Can you store corn for 8 months for a nickel? No. Market's telling you basis is good. Oh, by the way, if you deliver to Magnolia or Worthington, what's your basis? If you add a nickel onto this, 4 3/4 over. Last year was 3,600. See, 41 cents better. It kind of matches up with that map, doesn't it? Any questions on that?
Over at Marna where they had a much better crop.
Yep.
You don't have the prices listed, where are they setting?
That's because I'm embarrassed. And we'll be doing a meeting over there, and I apologize to the folks last time. When we did our last meeting over there, their basis was 25 cents wider than ours. You know, but what's the difference? How far is it to Marna? It's a long ways. And to truck corn from Marna to Worthington or Magnolia, it all gets eaten up by freight. It's the way basis is supposed to work. It's a good point. And we're not trying to discriminate against the people at our truck locations or satellites, but once again, there's freight costs to get it to the mills. New crop, 361 off the combine, 377 for the spring of 2021. You know, as you look to make new crop marketing decisions, the market is telling you that if you have on-farm storage, then you should be doing what? Selling the what? Selling the carry. So don't look so much at these prices right off the combine. Look out here, and I think if you push Keith for a bid for like June or July of 2021, I'm guessing it's probably going to be 385, maybe closer to 390. If we plant 5 million more acres of corn, and maybe we see a little bit of rally between now and then, nothing would get close to $4. Is there anything wrong with making some advanced sales? What about beans? What was the average price on beans for this crop year? Raised to $9, right? $8.85 to $9. Not too far away, are we? You can say, yeah, but today the market was down a nickel, so now we're farther away, so now I can store them, right?
Yeah, but it went up a dime since you looked at it.
Did it? Okay, well, that's good. A year ago. Smart aleck. I tell you, why do I try? A year ago, where were we out on beans on January 16th? Cash price was $8.11. Basis a year ago, you ready for this? 83.5 under. So you see we got a much better basis level and a better cash price than a year ago. And if we get this phase one deal signed, am I saying beans can't rally? No, not at all. You see, we already rallied 82 cents, and if we rally another dime or stuff off of fluff of getting this signed, and everybody getting excited, and prices get above $9, what might you want to do? You don't have to sweep the bend, but sell 10%, sell 20%, get some protection on. Any questions on that? And what about new crop? 123 million metric ton crop in Brazil, 50 million in Argentina. Still a question on what Chinese demand is going to be. It's not going to be what it was, what we had hoped it to be. And then we're going to plant more acres here. Keep an eye on this new crop side, because look at beans off the combine are almost $9. And if we have normal weather and you plant 65 bushel beans again at $9, does that work? Hello? Don't forget about the crop that you're about to plant. Any questions on this?
Does the USDA project next year's price like they do current year or not?
Before I say no, they don't month to month. But coming up here, about the third week of February, 21st to 23rd, somewhere in there, they'll have their annual ag forum. They will give an average price projection there, but it's just kind of a dart.
So does that number, the starting point then as we go forward, where this year's numbers come from is based off of last year's?
I think they put it into their model based on carry out, and ending stocks and production. They have a model that they put that into that spits out a price. You notice the ones that we talk about now, they change this from month to month. Last month on beans was $8.85. They raised it to $9. You know, if this phase one thing really starts to take off, they can adjust corn and beans up or down month to month. But for the next crop year, that you usually don't see it this far out.
When will they start publishing that?
Probably maybe May. May is when we get our first, when the World Crop Board puts out their first estimate of the crop that's being raised, and a lot of times you see it then. And what they usually start out with is a range, and sometimes that opening range on beans could be $1 a bushel. because they don't know. And it could be 50 cents on corn. And as you get closer, what happens? That range starts coming in because more of the unknowns are known. Good question. So what should you do? I don't know about expecting basis improvements, but for the next 60 days, I think, corn basis especially stays pretty firm. Now beans could be a little bit iffy because this rally that we had on beans of 80 cents, do you suppose New Vision bought some beans during that rally? Do you suppose MNSP bought beans during that rally? Shake your heads. I talked to the merchant that I buy soybean meal from at MNSP. He said, this rally's been pretty good to us. He said, we're pretty well covered into the third week of February. And if this bean market stays up where it's at or goes a little bit higher, pretty soon February's covered, and they're getting pretty good coverage. So it's not that their basis is getting weaker, but they don't really have to push the way they did because things are coming towards them. Watch commodity fund position changes. Remember, they were short corn, still short corn. They were short beans, now long beans. Your average prices, $3.85 on corn, $9 for beans. Keep an eye on the news now as phase one. First of all, we want to make sure it gets signed. And then as the market gets into that 86-page document, seeing what's there. South American production estimates, I really don't think are going to change a whole lot from what I'm hearing. The extreme southern Brazil and Paraguay are the areas a little bit in question, but most of the country's in good shape. They've gotten good rains. Crop is basically made. Keep an eye on weather patterns, RSIs, as kind of an indication of what's going on. Be careful about getting too bullish at the wrong time. We've had nice rallies on beans, a decent thing on corn. And I want to leave you with this. It's a great day to be alive, right? Because the alternative isn't so good. And the other reason it's a great day to be alive, what season did we just kind of pass through here in the last few weeks? Christmas? What's Christmas all about?
Birth of our Savior.
Did anybody here get the greatest gift they've ever received?
We all did.
We all did. And we can't forget about that. Because of what our good Lord did in sending His Son to the earth at Christmas time, that's what Christmas is all about. And I'm preaching to the choir, I understand that, but I want to make sure everybody understands that. His gift of His Son made us right with Him. It's like a prepayment. How would you like it here if somebody came in and prepaid your fertilizer for next year? Feel pretty good, right? God prepaid our debt forever. So every day is a great day to what? Geez, I've never been paid before for one of these things. You can pay it. It's a great day to be alive, right? Don't ever forget about that, because I know there's challenges. Marketing's not easy, and there's challenges with the crop this year and everything else. But keep in mind, there's better days coming, and that's all been prepaid for. Our reservation's been made. We just have to get there. So, thank you for coming. Any other questions before I turn it over to Jim? Okay. He's got one thing he needs to talk to you just briefly, and you probably can't read this, but I think they're going to hand something out for you.
You want to get the lights, John? What you're going to get is a brochure that talks about the grain marketing pool. A year ago was the first time that New Vision introduced this type of thing for producers if they had interest in participating in. What we looked at is having a preset of rules on each week that bushels would be marketed. And that has not changed. In other words, they're exactly the same this year as last. There's a 15-week window of time that bushels will be priced. And they'll be priced in 3 ways, using Wednesday of the week for part of the bushels, the relative strength index, and selling fall options. Those are the 3. So if you have some interest in this type of thing, the sign-up deadline is March 13th. Give us a call, ask questions, and do this possibly on a smaller percentage of your crop. The one thing that we did change with this program this year, that we didn't have last year, you can also enroll bushels in 2021 coffee. So we're talking 2 years out. So that's new. But the way it gets priced is not changed. So let either John or myself know if you have some interest in putting some bushels in this kind of program. Any questions on this at
What
this
was your
time?
track record this last summer?
Okay, good question. If you go back to last year, in the month of March and April, the market was pretty much sideways. So each week during that time period, bushels were priced. Then the market took off and got up to that 450 level that Dan was talking about. So already certain bushels had been priced and the market was up in value. When the program ended on corn, the average price that was attained was probably about 40 cents less than where the market was at the time that it ended. Okay? Now, with that being said, what was the price of corn when you actually got to harvest? I'm talking the ones in the December future.
Last year was the weirdest year I've seen.
Yes. The other thing I will say about what you've got in your hands is the corn chart, the seasonality of the market is still fairly standard, where you have your sideways prices in through April or part of April, but then takes off in value. Soybeans has flipped around. Seasonality in the last 3 and 5 years now are actually saying that that time period is a declining value. So this could get interesting. That was not true a year ago. So we'll see what happens, but this is a way that I can guarantee you that the bushels will be priced and the rules will be kept. So if you have some bushels you want to do, let me know. I or John, either one of us. Again, any other questions? Again, I thank you very much for coming. There are a few rolls that are left out there. If somebody wants to grab something, you're welcome to do so. And we'll see you on the next go around.
You're paying me, huh?